All right, so looking at the choice module autism, transition out of school.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed this one. So I was
Absolutely, yeah.
looking at understanding the importance of what it means for an autistic student to transition out of school and into adulthood. Something that I had not considered,
Oh, not at all.
even though I had multiple conversations with friends that have autistic kids,
Yeah.
and it's a massive gap in my knowledge and a really stressful thing for whānau. So it's been a huge learning for me. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
I mean, as a primary teacher, never really even considered it. We would obviously do a lot of work around transition between schools, transition between the classes, and had turned my mind to that, but you had never even considered that. I think one thing that came up for me in this module was sort of solidified the importance of that OARS work that we're doing.
Yeah.
Partly because the OARS, if you're successful in obtaining OARS, that support goes post school, and some of the and obviously some students who are autistic, who are autistic students qualify under that OARS criteria, and that support and that sort of wraparound continues for them a little bit longer. And so it did make me think, like, actually that's really cool that will be having a positive impact on them a little bit later.
Is it to 21? Is that right?
Yeah, I was actually found this one really interesting too. That the young woman who spoke in it, Rachel Wiltshire, I think it was, when she talked about coming out of year 13 and going to university and how hard it was. That was just really interesting because it was her sort of authentic experience. But gosh, it made me realise that having been a secondary teacher all these years and having form classes or whānau classes, that we used to work with and help them with their transition out of school.
Yeah.
With the neurodiverse students that we had, we never thought about the sorts of things that she talked about in this video. So, we would do things like we would help obviously we'd have, there'd be the whole careers and pathway stuff, definitely. But, with your whānau class, you'd do stuff like you'd talk with them about, you'd write their halls of residence references, and, you would talk with them about, help them pick their papers sometimes, ones who were, going to do gap years, you might talk to them about that sort of stuff. But we never really talked about, so how are you going to make friends? How are you going to build a social network? How are you going to manage that day-to-day stuff? And this just completely changed the way that now I would actually work with those, year 12, year 13 school leaver students. It was actually a real revelation. And not just neurodiverse students, like any school leavers.
Yeah, school leavers in general.
Yeah.
Change is massive, and for an autistic person, change can be really daunting. So it's that change of environment, change of curriculum demands, so from school to high school, university, academic.
And even just the removal of an external force providing your structure.
Right?
You're like, okay, well, I'm at school every morning at 8:15 because the school bus drops me off, and then I go home and I have my routine. At university, very free, very,
And actually, potentially, whānau with their kids aren't going to university for that fear. They don't understand what's actually there in a support capacity.
Yes.
And there is a lot of support in
Absolutely,
universities, but if the schools aren't having that conversation around, hey, we've noticed your kid's really good at X, Y, and Z. Have you considered, got really good grades and have you thought of?
That's so true.
Very interesting.
There's also one really nice point that I think it was in that same video that she made about, because I think she decided to leave university, I think after her first year, and had a bit of a break from it. And I thought it was a really good point she made about how, young people need to kind of understand that you don't have to follow that trajectory, that kind of expected trajectory of school, tertiary education, career. You can actually, you know, you can take a bit longer, or you can divert from that path, and that's okay. And I think for, you know, a young person like her who was probably, you know, she's obviously a high achiever and, you know, had really high standards for herself and everything.
Yep.
She must have had this fixed kind of idea of how things should go. And so I think that's probably really important, you know, those sorts of messages as well, that you don't have to follow that path.
No,
It was a neat module.
It was awesome. It was good.